Hi, welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name is Adam Hanlon. I'm the editor of Wetpixel, and I'm joined by our regular contributor, Alex Mustard. Hi, Alex.
Hey, Adam. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Still at home, as we all are in England.
I gather you're celebrating an anniversary.
Yes, yeah, and actually one I'm actually quite proud of. I've written, hundreds and hundreds of articles on underwater photography. I've probably written more than 100 for Wetpixel. I definitely wrote more than 100 for Underwater Photography magazine. And I've written many columns for many magazines down the years, all around the world. But one of the columns I currently write is a column on underwater photography called Be the Champ. It's just a fun name that came out from the magazine on underwater photography. It's a monthly column, and it's celebrating this month its 100th episode, its 100th installment. And it is actually, quite a lot of work. Each one is 1,500 words and 3 pictures. So it's a sizable amount of stuff that's been in there. This is Diver magazine, for those that don't know, is a British diving magazine, been running for a very long time. Certainly been running all my life, either as Diver or as its forerunner Triton, it was called for a few years. And I'm sure even if you've never been to the UK, you've probably seen copies of it in in dive shops, in dive resorts, in dive liveaboards all around the world. I mean, like these magazines, they do tend to travel and live for a long time. And I write an underwater photography column in there. I also write underwater photography columns in other magazines, and I do endeavour to make them all different. So if you pick them up, they are all written differently.
It's a monthly magazine, isn't it, Alex?
Yes.
So based on that, then, so I can do the maths quickly. So you've been writing your column for just over 8 years, then.
Yes. I haven't actually. It's not in every edition, because in the when it's been UPY month, I've often skipped the column and instead done a sort of summary of the UPY results, which haven't counted towards the column. So I've written probably 120 articles and features for Diver down the years, but 100 of them have been columns. And there's probably 110 of them have been about underwater photography, and probably 10 about just normal diving, features or something. But yeah, I'm actually really proud of it, because it is actually a sizable amount of work. And so to celebrate this 100th edition, what I did is about a month ago, I emailed round the British underwater photography community, and it's a British magazine, so I wanted to sort of make it quite an article about that, and asked all your friends and my friends and even photographers I didn't know so well, for their one big tip on underwater photography. And I said to them, look, this is what I want them for. I want you to all think differently, try and come up with something maybe someone else hasn't thought about. And also it can be about anything. And then I'll get them all and try and weave them all together into an article with all your advice in.
So
and some cheated like you. That gave me 2. But I put them all in, because in the end, it was all advice which was useful to the reader. Yeah. So I thought what we could do is maybe I'll just show you some of the pages and read out a few of them, almost at random, and then we could maybe discuss them further and see what advice is in there. Yeah. So the first person who appears is my friend and very celebrated underwater photography teacher, Martin Edge, who I thought should come in first. And he sort of, tried to get to the very beginnings of it. By his quote was, "Are you entering the water to have a fun dive or to take the best images you can?" And once you've answered that question, you then, don't get sidetracked. Your concentration is everything, and just that I thought it was a great way to start, really.
It's very much Martin's kind of one of the features of Martin's writing as well is he talks a lot about this idea of preparing pre-dive, getting yourself in the right space mentally, making sure that you're tailoring the dive to suit the photographic outcome you want, rather than the photographic outcome from whatever happened during the dive. And Martin's it's definitely a very signature kind of train of thought that Martin has.
I think Martin's got some fantastically clear thinking to get people who are not used, maybe divers first, photographers second, to actually make that leap and become photographers first. And I think maybe we should do another Wetpixel Live, looking at his new book, and really dig into some of that advice. Anyway, next up, I'm not going to read them all out, but next up is our friend Henley Spears, who says, to give yourself the best chance at memorable pictures, it's important that your identity as a photographer supersedes your passion for scuba diving. So kind of in the similar vein to Martin.
Same vein.
Yeah, meaning that you should be willing to ditch the dive if image possibilities are stronger on snorkel or just hanging over the side of the boat or even wading in shallow water. Yeah. And actually, I think a lot of the standout competition shots that we see, which is an area that Henley's very motivated by, are not taken scuba diving. They're often taken, free diving with big animals or people going into unusual environments and taking pictures.
I think you can broaden that even more by talking about things like the stuff that people are doing in swimming pools, the modelling stuff, setting things up on sets in swimming pools and all that kind of stuff. There's a broad church of photography here, and really to create iconic imagery, you need to go with what suits you. And if you happen to have access to a nice swimming pool close to home, that may well be a really good place to focus your efforts on to get memorable imagery, simply because you can spend a lot of time in it and perfect things. So
a photographer who's probably less well known to our international audience, although he's becoming very, very well known in the UK, doing some really great work, is Scottish photographer Mark Kirkland. Relatively young guy. He spoke at the British Society of Underwater Photographers recently, and people really enjoyed his presentation and his images. He says that, remember, photography is an art form, so don't get too obsessed with technical perfection. Just experiment and find your own creative impulse. And I think one of the great things about doing an article like this, where you're weaving together lots of people's advice, is it can really express the point that there's more than one way to take a photo, and there's certainly more than one way to be a photographer. And actually, by bringing all these influences together, we get a really nice mix of stuff. Next up I'm going to read out is Noor Tucker. I always look at other genres of photography for inspiration and creativity underwater, macro, fashion, flowers, and more. And I think that's very sage advice.
Yeah, I mean, Noor has another job as a photographer taking pictures of horses, and you can see some of the influences of that style of photography, of the way she shoots those animals, in the way that she often shoots underwater as well. So she's definitely a really good example of someone that shoots in several different genres and allows them to cross-fertilize between each other. So I think in general, as photographers, the more we look at other people's work, the better we get as photographers. I think that's a really important part of, and learn from other people's work, possibly looking and learning.
And I think I would never underestimate how much some of the big names are out there looking at images too. It's not something you do when you're starting. It's something you do all the time as a photographer. The next page in the article, which we flip to now on the screen, this is actually just a standalone pretty picture I took last year. But actually, the caption for this, I said, I skipped a dive and snorkel to take this image. It's a split level of the Red Sea at sunset. Something I do a lot on the workshops, try and get that message that it's not just about scuba diving underwater photography, even on a diving trip. Right, back into the next page, which is got a couple of nice purpley, pinky macro pictures of mine to illustrate it. And I'll skip to this next one, which is some fellow called Adam Hanlon. Develop your diving skills with the same intensity as you do your photography ones. So, I mean, you can expand on that a little if you want.
So I think when we are on scuba underwater, because we need the photography to be the primary focus, we need to be in a position where the diving skills are effortless and essentially don't need to occupy any conscious thought process. So the better we are at diving, if assuming we are using scuba, and obviously we've spoken about that quite a lot, and the better we are underwater, same as actually, better we are underwater, let's just say, the more we're able to focus on the creative part of photography. And trying to focus on both at the same time is inevitably going to compromise the results.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and there's actually quite a few people that are agreeing with that. And one of the things that's quite nice about the article is because no one knew what anyone else was saying, where several photographers are saying the same thing, you can tell that lots of people think it's really important, and it's an area that probably there's a need for people to work on. Simon Rogerson, who's actually the editor of sort of rival magazine Scuba, but I wanted him in here because he's also part of the British underwater photography scene as an individual. He says, before you take your camera in the water, you must have a high level of buoyancy control and spatial awareness. Poor buoyancy skills result in bad photographs and damage to the habitat. Just stressing that same point, really. And Saeed Rashid, another friend of ours, says a very similar thing. The best thing to learn is that buoyancy is king, and we are never too old or too proud to learn more about how to control it. And even the younger generation, I didn't just reach out to kind of, just our buddies. I wanted to reach out to a good variety from the British underwater photography scene. So a photographer that I'm sure won't be well known to many people watching this is a British teenage photographer called Jasmine Pegg. And her advice is the same. Learn about, specifically about diving skills. Learn about different finning techniques to control and maintain your position in the water and keep you steady for your photos. Again, even at that young age, she's sort of figured out how valuable getting those diving skills sorted out. And anyone who learns diving young tends to be very good on that side of things.
True. Yeah.
Okay, I think a lot of photographers then went on and gave advice about marine life. And I think, it's a big part of photography. And I think an area that I think a lot of photographers feel that quite a lot of their peers almost take for granted, that there's almost there's a lot of photographers out there who just don't have enough knowledge and respect of marine life and almost rely on shoot what they're shown as opposed to really understand what they're seeing. And lots of photographers commented on this. Caroline Robertson Brown says, get to know your subject, whether it's coral spawning, what food a nudibranch particularly likes, or the feeding patterns of a basking shark, and just saying the value of that field knowledge. The more you know about your subject, the more likely you'll be in the right spot at the right time. Jenny Stock continues, be patient and wait with a shy animal. It's surprising how often it will relax and resume its usual behavior. Yeah. And Jay Morgan carries on, often finding your chosen subject is half the battle, especially with the little ones. So research where they live, what they eat to make your job easier. Then all you have to do is take the perfect picture. She makes it sound easy. But I think, great to see three photographers, and in that case, three female photographers, all extolling the importance of a proper reverence for our subjects.
Yep. I think this idea of research as well is something that I've always found out. I think I mentioned before when shooting with people like Eric Cheng and Douglas Seifert, these guys go and they read academic papers. I know you do the same about their subjects in order to better to be able to better anticipate the best opportunities for capturing pictures. So that's something that I think a lot of photographers, you say, tend to arrive somewhere. The good dive guide points them in the direction, and off they go. That you could be more productive by doing some reading at home before you get there. Yeah, quite agree.
And then they go on to discuss how to dive or how to plan your diving best for photography. Rod Cuss sort of distills that down to dive one dive site 50 times, not 50 sites once. The best photos come when you know your subject and your site inside out.
Yep. Yeah, it's a huge advocate for shore diving. I find, shore diving allows you to dive the same site over and over and over. You get to know where stuff is. You get to know where the light is, how it affects the scenery or the animals you're shooting. It's a really productive way of getting good pictures. Yeah, quite agree.
Yeah, and I'll read another one from this section, and which really agrees with what you're just saying. It's Shannon Moran. She says, I'd say the most important thing is to be familiar with your local sites and know what you're looking at. I do most of my diving on the same site, yet every dive is different. But you slowly begin to learn the behavior, the territories, the personalities of the critters down there. And I do think, photographers who are lucky enough to have a local site that they can dive, even if it's not that amazing, it can really help their photography.
Yeah.
Okay. I think an area I'd like to move on to speak about now is how well you use your time underwater. And I think that's something photographers, talk about. And actually, a lot of that using your time while underwater comes from planning and preparing properly pre-dive, so that you're properly prepared when your air starts running out and your time starts counting down. Spencer Burrows says, practice on land as much as possible. Operating your camera should be second nature to make the best of any given opportunity.
Yep.
Invest time and effort in preparing to capture images before you get in the water.
Yep.
Nick Moore carries on. Have a clear plan when starting your dive or trip. Focus on which subjects you expect to shoot and which techniques you will use to capture them. This will lead to much more consistent, high-quality results. Yeah, really, really good stuff.
I think from Nick, I have to tell him, because Nick, obviously, with his sort of signature blur, motion blur pictures, you know, I think this is very much, you can see that Nick's going and is shooting in a particular way to achieve a particular, and he knows in his mind what sort of images he wants as a result of a trip or a dive, and that's, you know, that's definitely part of his pre-dive preparation, or down to his pre-dive preparation. Yeah.
I'll just move on to the last page now of the article, and I'm not going to read them all out, but there's quite a lot of talk about equipment, and you know, both sides of the argument. Plenty of people saying, you know, this piece of equipment or using your equipment to its maximum can make a really big difference. But you know, Rob Bailey counters that by saying it's the photographer who makes the photograph, not the camera. Which, you know, is good. And Georgie Bull, who's another young female British photographer, she says, while it's fun to delve into the variety of equipment available on the market, it can often feel a little intimidating if you're on a tight budget. Think carefully about how you can make the most of the equipment you have. A budget camera can do an amazing job of capturing the feel of a dive site, even if it can't capture a shrimp's eye in great detail like a more expensive piece of kit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I think this is we tend to love our toys, but sometimes we might be better off spending the money on going places to take pictures. You know, we well, maybe not at the moment, but in normal times, yeah.
And just to wrap things up, sort of photographers talk a little bit about how much you can learn from interacting with other photographers. Kirsty Andrews says, dive with other photographers. You can learn from and bounce ideas off each other, and they won't complain about having a photographer for a buddy. Jenny Stock sort of comes in as well, saying, show people your photos and talk about what you're trying to achieve. Listen to what they say. People love to share their knowledge with you. And Kathy Holmes adds to that, my advice would be to talk to as many photographers as you can. I think all these photographers ask questions, however simple they might seem, because generally someone else would have had that same problem, and they'll enrich you with a little gem that helped them. And I think it's a great reminder that, and it's something that sort of came through in this article to me, is that we are a community, and we're very lucky to be a community. You know, we're not a bunch of lone wolves doing our own thing. And I think Wetpixel is a fantastic example of that. The amount of knowledge I've learned from the forums down the years, interacting with other photographers in a global community, I think it's something I treasure greatly in underwater photography, and it's a big part of our hobby, is that we get to enjoy our hobby and benefit from those friendships and from those you know, from that sharing of knowledge within our community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of a little bit of summary. I've only read out some of the. I think there's more than, I think it's 35 photographers who contributed, and we've read about 10 or 12 out today. So do dig out the article. It is available online, and it's available for free online. You just have to register an email to access the magazine. But it just takes a second. They don't do anything with the email addresses.
And this issue is going to come out when, Alex? When will it?
It will be out by the time. It's out now. By the time this is going to go live.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So you should be able to access it from anywhere in the world with a browser.
And I'm sure I'll be sharing it on social media as well. So yeah, if you have a look at my recent social media posts, I'm sure you'll find a link direct to the magazine.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Alex. Congratulations on
your
anniversary.
It's nice to. I wouldn't have known, except that when I started, I numbered the Word files that I wrote the articles in. So that's the only reason I realised, because I reached 100.
So Alex has made 100. I'm not going to say years old, but articles. So thank you very much. Look forward to reading it. I haven't read it either, so I look forward to that. I'd like to thank everyone for watching. I'd like to thank Backscatter for sponsoring this episode, Backscatter Photo and Video. Please feel free to write your favourite comments in the comment section below, or your favourite suggestions, or your favourite tips, and add us a like, give us a like if you enjoyed the episode. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again soon.